Hi, this is Kel Brigham at Kel Checks In. This is the introduction to what will be a three-part series of videos discussing fatness and fructose metabolism. That sounds kind of dry, but it's actually pretty fascinating. This is driven by a recent experience in my life, which was my first ever flare up of gout. I'm 58, so I'm right on time with this. When women do get gout, it's usually at about my age. And since the pain is excruciating, it drove me to do a lot of research, as in, how do I get rid of this? And it led me on a voyage of discovery regarding fructose metabolism and its impact on all sorts of things. A little bit of background: I've been a fat person all of my life, even as a baby, and became a fat activist. I picked up the red pill on this issue in 1982 and have been in groups, out of groups, just trying to do my best on my own. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because many of the problems that impact contemporary feminism, or really feminism for about the past 15 years, 20 years, also have weakened and marginalized the fat civil rights movement. You know, all the questions that led people to ask who stole feminism are pretty much present in the fat acceptance movement. And I was going to give a whole long discussion of that, but it's really not necessary for this purpose. There is some good stuff out there. And I'll put links to all of this in the commentary for these videos, and more about where that'll be hosted in a minute. But there is a podcast called Do No Harm, which has some good information. Also, Peggy Howell, who is heading up the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, as an individual, has some good articles out there. So you might Google her, Howell. So I'm gonna set up here some rules of engagement, because anytime a fat person goes online for any reason, he or she opens themselves up to considerable abuse. And because I'm having the temerity to discuss issues of nutrition and fatness, I may get on the radar of the bigots and wind up getting pummeled with abuse and yet another round of death threats. It's like, get in line. I've had so many death threats in my life, I can't even keep count. But in order to wrangle all of that, if it happens to occur, I will be posting the videos on YouTube and on Vimeo, and also creating companion posts on my personal blog, kelbrigan.com, KELLBRIGAN.com. But comments will be available only on the personal blog. I will not be enabling them for Vimeo. I don't even know if Vimeo does comments, but I will not be doing them on Vimeo, and I won't be doing them on YouTube. YouTube is a zoo. I don't think there'd be any helpful discussion there. So also, by putting them, by hosting them only on my personal blog, I'll be able to monitor, to mediate. I will not be accepting all comments, and I will not be posting all comments with the videos. What will happen is any comments I receive that are abusive, will be posted, but they will post it on their own page with as much citation information as I can find. Most people who are doing that kind of activity create fake identities, so there's not much point trying to play detective and find them and report them and all that. It's just they tend to do very cowardly hit and run attacks. But I would like to show any abuse that I do get, just to demonstrate to people who don't know just how much fat people are hated in this culture. It's pretty amazing. And if you're just a run-of-the-mill decent human being, it would never occur to you that some of these things would happen, because they're things that you would never do, you know? And if you're not a fat person, you may not have seen them. But believe me, there are some psychos out there. And unfortunately, some of them vote. And more about that in the second video. Also, so that's how we'll be dealing with the nasty people. Also, in any discussion of fatness or nutrition or anything like that, I've seen several patterns, and one of them is that a lot of people immediately default to subjective experience. And we're not going to be talking at that level. We're going to be looking at the level of populations. We're going to be looking at hard data. We're going to be looking at research, the real deal. And what happens is, I don't know if people are looking for absolution or if they're made uncomfortable, so they're trying to control the conversation. But for whatever reason, one of the things you see is people will post an endless diary of what they ate that day, or what their personal philosophy of nutrition is, or whatever. That has nothing to do really with the discussion. It has no value in the discussion, because most of these choices are based on personal experience, which could well be valid, but it doesn't apply to the entire population. Or it could suffer from all of the problems of subjective reporting, which is, all kinds of biases, all of that. So any posts that or any comments that I see that are just people saying, well, I never eat margarine, and I never eat this, and I never do that. And my great aunt Eloise, subsisted on oat hulls and wheat chaff, and she lived to be 97. None of that's going to get through. I'm sorry. None of those comments will be approved. Because it's not the level of conversation I'm willing to spend my time on. You've got to bring it up a notch intellectually. Also, one of the things that I'll see people doing is, anytime a controversial issue of any kind comes up, is you can see you can see this technique where people will try to kill the conversation by changing the subject. So people who are going to post comments about, well, thin people are discriminated against too, period. Or this whole discussion is invalid because fat people make their own problems, or, whatever, any attempts to to just shut down the conversation, I will not be approving the comments for. I will not be, as I just kind of alluded to, I'm not going to be posting comments by people who try to invoke the third law of thermodynamics, because for one thing, that will be discussed in the videos I'll be mentioning in a minute. But human beings are not machines. We're not simple machines. And trying to shut people up by invoking utopian physics in a frictionless environment has nothing to do with what we're talking about. And my data can beat up your data. I'm also not going to allow comments that try to turn this into a fight between low carbers versus low sugar versus Atkins versus paleo, what's called paleo. All we're going to be talking about is sugar intake, specifically sucrose. Well, sucrose, as we'll see, is a combination, is 50-50 glucose and fructose. We're also going to be talking about fructose in other forms, naturally occurring in fruits, and also as it occurs in high fructose corn syrup, which most of the time is about 55% fructose and 45% glucose. That's what we're talking about. We're not going to be talking about Atkins. We're not talking about what is, so-called paleo. I don't know why, again, but whenever you start to talk about the impact of sugar on human beings, it brings out people who are enraged that you're not also condemning sources of glucose in the diet. In other words, starches. That's not the discussion. I mean, we will be looking at why, personally, I believe that there's a big difference between glucose metabolism and fructose metabolism. And that difference is very important. It is literally a matter of life and death for many people, one of whom may be me. So there's that. This whole project is not going to be a bulletin board or the side of a bathroom. I'm going to be acting like an editor. If you want your comment to be reproduced on my site, make it good. Make it a good discussion. Avoid logical fallacies. Make your case. Provide citations as you can. We're going to bring it up a notch from the usual level of online discussion, I hope, if I get any response at all. Before watching part 2 of this video series, I recommend some homework. There are at least 4 videos that I think you should watch that will prepare you for the rest of this discussion. And I will provide links to them. Before you dive into the videos, I must give a bit of a warning, though, especially if you're a fat person. The discussion can be extremely insensitive, even as it accurately represents fat people's experience. Many of the conversations are held, the address to the audience, as if there is no fat person in the audience. In other words, the fat people are them, and we're talking about how we're going to deal with their problem. There are some incidences of the infamous headless fatty shots. There are pictures of fat people with their eyes blacked out as if they're criminals, all of that garbage. There are some remarks that are extremely insulting and dehumanizing. Many of these conversations are held between doctors or people in the medical profession. And as many of you know, there is rampant bigotry against fat people in the medical business. And it makes itself known in some of these videos. At the same time, what Lustig and Taubes are doing is actually still very brave, because the degree of advocacy that they're showing for fat people actually is very controversial. And even the fact that they're offering an alternative, for instance, to what's mislabeled as weight loss surgery, it's actually not nearly that successful to deserve that name, is very controversial. The cutting up of fat people's bodies and fat children's bodies makes a lot of money for hospitals and for medical centers. And to say anything that challenges it really raises the fur on a lot of people, because you're threatening one of their cash flow sources. I'm torn with Tobbs and Lustig. I'm very grateful for their work. I trust their science, but I also know to go in with my armor up, because they're not always going to get that they're talking about human beings. They just don't. They what happens is they fall back into the habits of the mainstream culture. It's interesting, if you watch Lustig's early videos and then watch his later ones, he does get some clues. There are some of his cutesy smart aleck remarks do taper off. But just be warned, be ready. Don't watch this if you're a fat person and you're having a bad day. Wait until you feel better. I do not issue this warning as far as Paul Campos is concerned, because Paul Campos totally gets it. Unfortunately, I could not find a link to the best speech I've heard him give. The one I'm linking is the 2013 Harvard University Bicknell lecture, which is pretty good, but he's actually spoken better in the past, and it's kind of frustrating. But this one's still pretty good. Paul Campos wrote The Obesity Myth. It was also reissued as The Diet Myth. So anyway, there are those 4 videos I'm recommending. At least there are many, many more on the subject. Caveat emptor. There's a lot, everybody and their aunt, including people like me, lots of common people are spouting off on their opinions on this stuff. I'm coming a little late to the story. I think this whole thing broke really as early as 2003, but especially about 5 years ago. But I'm here now. So part 2 is mostly going to be questions and commentary. And I hope will be the beginning of discussion on some of the issues I'll raise. I do think it needs to be part of this whole discussion. I don't see a whole lot of fat voices looking at this issue. And I think we need to. I think it's important. I think that this is not like discussing gluten. This is not like discussing, red dye number 2 or anything like that. My age is showing there. This is going to be major. It looks like we're going to have to reconsider sugar and put it in the same legal and personal and nutritional category as alcohol, in that it is something that some people should not use at all, that it probably should be kept away from kids. It should, and Lustig gets into this, that it should not be considered a GRAS substance, GRAS, that's an ADA categorization for generally recognized as safe. Probably doesn't deserve that categorization. And obviously this is very controversial stuff, because we're talking about a lot of money. Part 3, I'm just going to go through my bookshelves. It occurred to me that I've been doing this research and living this life consciously, awake, critically, analytically, since 1982. And I can't put 26 years of learning and citations into a single place. And I'm not going to play that game. It's like, well, prove it, Well, if you want me to prove it, you're going to have to look at 26 years worth of books and get busy reading yourself. I will be providing some citations, but they are the tip of the iceberg. You cannot take all of this in one sitting. Anyway, that's what part 3 will be. Look for the accompanying post on this introduction on kelbriggan.com. It'll be linked to from If I can, from Vimeo, and also definitely from YouTube. Welcome to the discussion. Bring your best game. As I said, don't do those knee-jerk responses or those fear-based responses or those hate-based responses, because that's just not going to wash. That day is long gone. I'm doing this because I think it will help restore fat people to full humanity. I think looking at the truth about sugar will actually show that the glutton theory is a myth once and for all. Also, I think reconsidering whether or not to have sugar in our lives for many individuals can greatly promote health. If nothing else, it may help you avoid gout. And God knows, if it only did that, it would be worth it. But I think it does much more. So, end of part 1, to be continued. See you soon.